Right, it's Monday, November 4th. This is an end of the day SPY recap and kind of a SPY outlook going forward. Today on the daily chart, the SPY continued lower after that shooter bar here on Friday, and ultimately it did reach the target of taking out the weekly low. So that was always in play after the end of last week. We had the big red bar. You kind of expected once you see that kind of a bar, at least the low will be tested. So on the weekly chart, it's done all it needs to do, and we have a good reference point to determine if it's going to continue lower or possibly, at this point, start trying to reverse higher after this 3-week pullback. The reason you're still a little biased to the downside is the monthly chart that we talked about ended up with a shooter bar, and that's after 5 weeks of moving higher, a little shooter red bar. So you kind of still think we want to come down and test the lows of that monthly bar, which is in line on the weekly chart with some of these targets down here. So that's still the outlook until proven otherwise. Since the weekly chart has already reached its target and the daily chart did follow through lower, it is possible that you get a 2-up day going into the remainder of the week, and maybe we try to come up into that gap. So the key thing too is that this purple line represents not only the start of this week, it represents the start of the month that was on Friday. So it's kind of a good reference point. If we stay below that, we stay red. And if we head above that, we can continue to, we could kind of shift our bias to the upside. But, we're just going to have to see tomorrow, for example, if price wants to maybe start up and possibly begin to reverse. Now, if it begins to reverse on the weekly chart, I want to see it come up to the halfway point of this red bar from last week to possibly get a 3 bar to the upside, and that's going to mean it's going to have the midpoint of that weekly chart is right here in this gap. So should we head higher, it's going to be very important to judge how price handles this gap. If it comes up here and can't follow through higher and then gets a 2-down day, you might anticipate more red and this target being hit. If we go down first, then and can't rebound from this area, stay below the purple line, then we stay biased to the downside towards these targets. And if we really continue lower on the monthly chart, we want to see for the entire month, can we get down to some of the our next target down here should things get really weak. I know the election is tomorrow and there's a lot of uncertainty and everything else, but that doesn't really affect the way I'm looking at price action. It's price I think is going to do what it's going to do, and we could judge it based on the charts here. Red and green like always, and kind of go from there. Today, finally, on the 15-minute chart, I kind of shot an opening video where price did move down right out of the gates and took out the low of the previous day, which was here, which I kind of anticipated would happen. And then I discussed as it was moving up a little bit that I still thought there was potential because of that weekly chart to test those roll over and come lower, and that's what price eventually did. Didn't quite get up here to the pre-market highs. It instead rolled over with a nice red bar, and that was kind of a good signal to make another push down towards the lows of the day, and in this case, our target, the weekly, low. So that's why, it obviously seemed to pause there, have a little bit of a bounce, follow through a little lower, and we end up with, this kind of interesting red bar where the context of this purple line is kind of important going forward. So we will see what happens tomorrow. But for now, I'm still biased lower based on that monthly chart, but I do know the weekly chart has reached its target here, so anything's possible in terms of possibly reversing to the upside. So we'll see relative to that purple line, can we get green or do we stay red? And finally, on the you can see here, like on this weekly chart here, when it kind of comes down on a pullback, and you kind of expect, in this case, the lows to be tested. Well, it tried to get down there, but then it turned green at some point, and that's where you get biased to the upside. So on this weekly chart, we did hit the low, but if it turns green, there's no reason not to, consider that this is just a 3-week pullback that might be starting, green again to the upside overall. But price has to lead us that way. And same thing on the monthly chart, even though the difference here, in my opinion, is when we came down here and turned red, and you would think, all right, maybe we're going to, it's 1 month red, another month red, another month red, and then you were wondering if you're going to continue to follow through. Well, you started green, and that after a pullback, once you started green, your buy has stayed up all month. Here, we're kind of at the top of a move, so that's why I still think that low should be tested relative to this, which is more of a pullback that has the potential to either continue or reverse. Same thing with this first pullback. This was an interesting one here. It just shows you could have a 1 month, pullback that you would think should head lower, but once we couldn't really do that and turn green on the month, you stay biased to the upside until you get some daily signal, maybe trying to test those lows. So that's why even on this bar, while I expect lower, kind of like this bar, maybe if we turn green and we have the good reference point, I'm just going to call this a pause area and we head higher. But what's interesting here is if we do head higher on this chart, I do know we have a very important gap to monitor for whether or not this is just kind of, if you can almost consider a channel coming down, you could see maybe a little bit of a pullback to here towards the top of that trend line, and then it rolls over and continues lower for the rest of the month. So, again, daily chart is where I'm going to start. If we can get a 2-up bar, I'll expect it to kind of work through that gap, because I know at that point you're above the purple line. I'll stay biased green. But any failures up in here that roll over back down, then I know that monthly chart is taking over to start working down towards these targets down here and possibly lower. So that's kind of a recap for today. And, election, day tomorrow, interesting, volatility maybe for the rest of the week, but I'm still going to go with the charts day after day.